Well, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good lunch and some time in the exhibit hall. My name is Howard Shapira. My company is Action Scaffolding, Action Equipment and Scaffolding out of Phoenix, Arizona. We were one of the founding members of the Scaffold Association back in 1972. My dad was the third president of our association, and I had the good fortune to be the 17th president of the association from 2004 to 2006. It's fitting that I get this opportunity to introduce our next speaker, because I'm often asked through the 45, 50 years I've been in the association and in the business, what's the biggest benefits of coming to a convention or a conference? And for me, it was always networking. You get to meet not just your vendors and your manufacturers that you buy from, but other companies around not just the country, but the world that do what we do. And you get to share information, and I think that's truly one of the greatest benefits of having a convention like this, is getting to do that. I would like to introduce Diane Darling. She's presenting the effective networking strategies at this time. Diane is considered a pioneer in the world of networking when people mainly thought that was just for computers. She has been on LinkedIn since it started, which is saying something. In fact, her membership number, I don't know how you knew this, is 16,418 out of over 1 billion people. McGraw-Hill has published her book in 9 languages. She has spoken for Yale Law School, Harvard Business School, 20th Century Fox, Fidelity Investments, and many more. Very seasoned speaker. Her expertise extends across the diverse sectors, including healthcare, finance, law, and technology. In her previous life, Diane was a school teacher. She did fundraising and was a tour leader, taking Americans to over 60 countries on all 7 continents. So you might want to take her aside after this and get some insight on where to travel to. Through her workshops and presentations, Diane empowers individuals to cultivate communities and forge meaningful connections, both personally and professionally. Please help me welcome Diane to the stage.
Howard, appreciate it.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. How many of you would consider yourselves extroverts? Extroverts. Yeah? All right, the introverts, you don't even have to raise your hands. We want to make this a fun session for you. I want to be sure you feel comfortable. I will share with you that I test as an introvert, but I'm on the gentle side of being an introvert, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, because talking about introverts is one of my favorite things to do. When you hear this word networking, what pops to mind? Do I have a few honest people here who are going to tell me what comes to mind when you hear the word networking? When you hear the word networking. Okay. What else? Exchanging business cards. Yep. What else? Being out of your comfort zone. It can be really awkward and really uncomfortable. So what I'm hoping we can do today is have this be kind of a safe zone. How many of you remember the first time you drove a stick shift? Yeah? What kind of a car was that? Shout out. 81 Trans Am. Okay. I have yet to hear Maserati. I have yet to hear Porsche. So part of what we're going to do today is, because this is going to be a safe zone and we might even practice a little bit of networking, I'm going to teach you how to get rid of people at a cocktail party, and you can try that out tonight, right? So part of what we're going to do is have you do a little bit of exercises, so don't be too scared. We're going to make this a little bit of fun. But when you hear this word networking, sometimes a negative word comes to mind, and that's okay. That's okay, because it is a real part of it. But networking, my 2 definitions of networking is it's building relationships before you need them. Before you need somebody in business, you call other people and say, who do you know who can do this for me? I'm looking to hire. I need 3 people who can do this. Who do you know who can do this? So you build those relationships ahead of time, and then your network begins to grow. The other definition I have is networking is the transference of trust. When someone says, use my name, that is the transference of trust. And that is very much at the core of networking, because it's really, really important we think about how we can transfer this trust, how we can make people feel that I have a genuine interest in you, and when you use my name, it's going to be done with respect. It's going to be done with a sense of dignity. I get the call every so often from different people saying, Diane, it's been a long time. And I'm just this shy of saying, and guess what? You're unemployed, right? Because I only hear from you when you need a job. Or Diane, it's been a long time, and I only hear from you when you need money. Not that I have a lot, but people will call. So it's amazing how people will do this. So we have a growth mindset and we have a fixed mindset. The growth mindset says, I'm going to try something that's going to maybe be a little uncomfortable. I'm going to try something. You came here with a sense of excitement, opportunity. You're going to meet some different people. You're going to have that sense of interest in other people. And sometimes you have a fixed mindset. I'm only going to sit with the people I know. I'm only going to sit with the other people because guess what? They may not want to talk to me. Well, when was the last time you sat down at a table? And I've sat down at several of your tables so far, and I said, can I join you? And nobody has said, no, I don't want you to join me. But we have in our head something's going to go wrong. And I jokingly say, if you have that in your head, that means you're an adult. Because when we're kids, we don't care. We just sit at the table anyhow. When we're really, really little, one time I was on a plane, and this little guy looks at me, he says, I'm 4, how old are you? And I said, I'm a little older than 4. How much older than 4 are you? I said, we'll just put a few zeros after that, we'll be fine. And the dad says, please leave the lady alone. So part of it is we want to think about, can we have a bit of an expansion in our mindset? Can we have a little bit of growth? And think about some ways for that to be a little bit uncomfortable, but we're going to learn. Just like that stick shift, the first time you drove that stick shift and you went from first to second, and then you got into third, you felt like you were a rock star. and then when you dared to go on the highway, it was really, really brave. I was learning to drive a VW Bug, a 1968 VW Bug. It was a really, really old Bug. I think it was about 15 years old when my dad got it for me. And I'm driving it around the block, and that night, my leg hurt so much. And I said, Dad, I did something to my leg. And he said, sweetheart, there's a muscle in the back of your left leg you've never used before until you drove the clutch. So you have this muscle the whole time. I didn't go and put it in and say, now you're going to go network at the conference and I'm going to give you a muscle. You've had it the whole time. So now we're going to figure out how can we go into our growth mindset and think about who do we really want to be as we expand in this, as we begin to think about what are some different ways. We have in the beginning that kind of fear zone, the red, and then we have the learning zone, and then you have the growth zone. This was especially true during COVID. So I want you to give yourself a little bit of a pass. We've been kind of locked down. We've had some things that have been kind of a little bit awkward and ugly. So part of it is I want to give yourself a little bit of a pass if this feels uncomfortable, because it's a stretch. It can be a bit of a stretch for us to do this. All right, so we define in networking. The next element, if you will, is going to be action. You got to go and do it. So my favorite way is one-on-one. I like to have one-on-one conversations with people because that feels like a sense of purpose for me. I feel like I have a sense of reason for that. I say, can I have 15 to 20 minutes of your time? Here's the reason why I'd like to talk to you. And then I watch the clock. And when it's at about 18 minutes, I'm like, listen, I know we got just a minute or two left. Do we want to talk further or do we not want to talk further? One time I was at the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Awards in California. And it's the women's cocktail party. So I went to the women's cocktail party as a guest. My friend had been a winner in the past. And so there's this guy there, and I'm like, bless his heart, he doesn't fit in. He's a guy. I don't fit in because I'm a guest. I'll go say hello. So I go up to him and I said, tell me your connection to the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Awards. And he looks at me and smiles. I'm the CEO of Ernst & Young. I said, sugar. And so note to self, look at the picture of the CEO before you go anywhere, was a lesson I learned in that one. In the course of the conversation, he mentioned he's from St. Louis. Anybody here from St. Louis? Anybody from St. Louis? Nope. All right, well, if you ever want to meet someone from St. Louis, you ask them one question. Where did you go to high school? Because that tells you what your network connections are. That tells you your intersection. So I said, where did you go to high school? And he said, you know St. Louis, don't you? Because he said he was from there. And I said, yes. And he dodged the question for a while, and then later on he told me he went to one of the posher prep schools. But in the course of the conversation, I said, I'd really love to talk to you about your career path. He said, come to New York sometime, and I'm happy to give you 15 to 20 minutes. So if you ask for 15 to 20 minutes, you can get that. A TED Talk is 18 to 20 minutes. A sitcom is 18 to 20 minutes when you take out the commercials. So ask for 15 to 20 minutes. Say, I'll bring you the coffee. Which one do you like? Most cases they say, we've got coffee here. You don't even have to pay for it. But try this one-on-one time, because that I think in some cases is what is really, to me, very meaningful. Now, in order to find those people, you go to events, such as today. On your tables is a chart called How to Work a Room. And I'm going to walk through a little bit of the highlights of the How to Work a Room chart to give you a few tips on some different things that I find that are helpful for me. So first of all, one of the first things that I do is I do some preparation work. Where am I going? Where am I staying? How long is it going to take me to get from the front door up to the office? Because sometimes that can, with security these days, it's a little bit less so now, but it can take a little bit of a while. Who am I meeting with? I did some research ahead to find out who some of the players were in your organization. I spoke for Build Boston. I live in Boston. I spoke for Build Boston a couple years ago. I know people in construction out there. I said, how much do you know about this organization? What are some different things that I should think about? So part of it is you want to do a little bit of homework ahead of time before you go into any event and you navigate this around. Then another little tip I'll share with you is I go to the food table. And the reason I go to the food table is you can have a common conversation with people there. Is that spicy? I'm not so great on spicy things. And I get some conversations from people like, oh yeah, this isn't too spicy, it's okay. And then one of the things I sometimes will do with meeting planners is I will help them find a networking friendly food. Because nothing against, chicken wings, but it's not great to do a chicken wing and a handshake. It's not always the best combination. So I go to the food table, I have some conversations. You guys are wearing lanyards, that's fine. Sometimes I'll take my lanyard and I'll ring it up to my neck so you don't have to necessarily look at my navel to find out my name tag. I find out my name. Other times your name tag goes on the upper right shoulder because when you shake hands, the hand goes out and the eye naturally falls up the right arm. It's so funny how I meet people 5 years later. It's on the right side, Diane. It's on the right side. They're so proud of themselves that they have their name tag on the right side. Another thing I do is when I walk into rooms, I feel very intimidated, so I try and be the first person in the room. I was the first person in the room today. You all came into my space. I didn't have to go into your space. So I like to be one of the first people in the room. I had a chance to say hello to a few people. I met an 80-year-old who's running her company and doing a great job, even though people tell her she should sell it. And so it gave me a chance to talk to a few people. I have a few friendly faces in the audience because I got here ahead of time. I did this with a friend. She has a party every year for Epiphany Day, and I'm always the first person there. I know the name of the dog. I know where the coats go. Everybody thinks we're best friends. No, I even park in the driveway because no one's leaving. So I get there ahead of time because then I feel a sense of belonging, and that works for me. Now, that may not be something necessary for you, but that helps me. Another thing I do is I always go talk to the people who are by themselves. I find the person who's all by themselves because they feel how I felt in 5th grade when I was at a new school and I didn't know anybody. I was a baby here up in Boulder, and then we moved to Indiana, and then we moved overseas. I think I went to about 14 schools before I went to college. So I'm very familiar with what it's like to be the new person in school. I still don't like it. So you might have capacity to do something, but it doesn't mean you say, ooh, yippee, I get to go talk to a whole bunch of people in the room. And if you feel like you're walking into a room of strangers, That means you had parents who loved you because they said when you left the house, don't talk to strangers. So you go into a room and you think there's a whole bunch of strangers. Anybody ever been mugged at one of these conferences? No, not yet. He's pointing. So part of it is you haven't, this is a safe group of people, but these are people who you might not have yet met. A couple of things that I do as far as my homework goes is I research the speakers ahead of time, and I send them an email, and I say, is there a question you'd like me to ask during the Q&A? This is a gift for the audience, and it's a gift for the speaker. Because what happens at the end of when the speaker? There's a round of applause, and then what? Silence, and it's torture. So the one brave person who raises their hand and asks the first question is somebody who you just like, oh my gracious, as a speaker, you just love that person. And this has now become something that I do all the time. 1001, 1002, I raise my hand. I did this many, many years ago. In fact, I can remember exactly when it was. It was January of 2002. The speaker was the owner of the New England Patriots, Robert Kraft. 800 people in the room, not a single question. And this is the first year the Patriots won the Super Bowl on their run. And I didn't have a question, but I just felt badly for the guy. So they said, wait a minute, we'll bring you a microphone. I'm like, take your time. I had no idea what question I was going to ask, but I just wanted to be thoughtful. Another time, it was the CEO of one of the big military companies, and he talked about bringing in kids, Red Sox baseball players, to get kids interested in math and science. Now, when I was a 7th grade girl, I wasn't interested in math and science. I was interested in boys. If they brought in the Red Sox players, I knew by then I wasn't going to play for the Red Sox. So immediately it kicked out all the girls. So I raised my hand and I was all set to say, what are you going to do for the girls? But I had listened to his introduction, and it said he liked making beer can chicken. Who can explain beer can chicken? Anybody know beer can chicken? What is it? Shove a beer can up a chicken and grill it. And so that's exactly what beer can chicken is. I had just had one for my birthday, and it was just really, really yummy. So I said, big fan of beer can chicken, and here's my question. He says, forget the beer. Sauvignon Blanc, some lemon and dill. And he starts giving me a beer can chicken recipe, and I just turned purple. And so all of a sudden I thought, and he said, what was your question? I said, what are you doing for the girls? I said, they know they're not going to play baseball at 7th grade, and don't you want them? And his whole point was he wanted to have American kids in his company because he knew he needed them for military stuff. And so I don't even remember his answer, but I do remember half the people who tapped my shoulder said, what's beer can chicken? And the other half the people said, thank you for looking out for my daughter, because I want her to have a chance at this. So part of it is raise your hand and ask a question. Yes, this is a plant, because I do want some of you to ask a question. So the other thing I'll do is, because I have introduced myself to the speaker ahead of time, I go to them before they've spoken. Because after they've spoken, everybody knows who they are. It's a little trickier to get hold of them. So one time this happened, and it was the founder of LinkedIn. I had written him ahead of time. And he said, it was really, really hot that day. And I said, hey, Reed, it's a warm day. What would you like from the bar? He said, hey, I'd just love, a Diet Coke. I came back and I said, and by the way, my name is Diane Darling. And he said, I should have known. So part of what it is make yourself part of the audience ahead of time before you go. It doesn't take a lot of work, but it makes you feel like you have a sense of belonging. It works for me. Maybe it's not necessarily for you, but it does work for me. So the other thing I'm going to talk about is when you're at these events, we do handshakes. Anybody ever here gotten a bad handshake? Yeah? Tell me about some bad handshakes. Dead fish. What else? Painful. I mean, like, what are you going to do? Crush me? Absolutely. What else? You ever have the ones that just last a little too long, that just kind of keep going and keep going and keep going, and you're wondering, when is this going to end? Yeah? Sweaty? Absolutely. Absolutely. What else happens with bad handshakes? Well, yeah, that's fair enough. All right, I need a volunteer, and I'm not going to give you a bad handshake, but can somebody come up and we're going to do a quick exercise. I'm a former school teacher. I will start volunteering people. All right, thank you so much. All right, so, hi.
Hi.
Patrick, nice to see you. All right, so Patrick, what we're gonna do about a handshake is that a good handshake is straightforward, 1001, 1002, and then you let go. You don't hang on and do this, and do this, and do this a little bit more, and do this a little bit more. Here's another tip, is if you do not want to get kissed. It is so nice to see you, Patrick. And you put your hand right there, and guess what? He's not coming any closer, right? So do you want to try it with me, and you're going to get rid of me? I'm not going anywhere. All right. So the other thing to give him a round of applause. One more thing. So the other thing to do is that handshakes, you guys, the guys are great at handshakes. You shake before the game, then you shake after the game. We missed, let's try that again. That was my fault. I got a bad handshake. So whenever I get a bad handshake, I say, we missed, my fault, let's try that again, because I got him kind of at the end of the fingers, and he's going to think, oh, wait, if she teaches this was bad. So the other thing is that because you guys shake hands before the conversation, and then at the end of the conversation. Ladies, we don't do this as much. And also women, we are supposed to put our hands out first. And this is something that a lot of women don't know. And when I do this with the international population, the Brits will say, yeah, there's no way a British man is going to put his hand out, because it's like putting his hand out to the Queen. You wait for the Queen to put her hand out to you, and then you say it's okay. So ladies, we need to put our hands out. Also, handshakes are a great way to say, I've enjoyed this conversation, and I'm going to let you go on, and I get to scoot off to the bar. So give them a round of applause and say thank you. The other thing that happens while you're at these events and you're introducing yourself is you say your name. I have tested this out now for about 10 or 15 years. If I say, hi, I'm Diane Darling, I get Darlene. Nice to see you. If I say, I'm your speaker today, with a bit of a pause, my name is Diane, with a bit of a pause, Darling. People will remember my name. So I want you to think about how, if people don't get your name correct, in some cases, we need to slow it down. We're so excited about what we're going to say next. We so want to make a great first impression that we whiz through our name. Now, for those of you who have kids, you get this. You have no name for 20 years. You're so-and-so's mom or dad, right? You've no name. My mom wasn't Ann Darling. She was Diane's mom when she picked me up in Boulder as a little girl. So what I want you to do is think about something I call a dyslexic introduction. Say something about yourself first. I could say today, I'm from Boston. I could say I was a kid in Boulder. I could say I'm your speaker. My name is, and slow yourself down. People want to remember your name. They really would. We had fun with the AV guys on how many people forget their names. There's the AV guys. There's the AV guys. They meet these people. They work with them 6 or 7 times a year, and they're still known as the AV guys. Take a moment to learn their name and slow it down. So as you're kind of working around the room, I begin to think about who is it I'd like to follow up with? Who is it I'd like to have a one-on-one with? And then I begin to curate that. The other thing that's happening is business cards. Now, some people still carry paper cards, and some people have digital cards. I carry both because I like to be able to give a paper card, and at some of your tables, there's my little card which has little hints on it. And so I like to be able to give people a card, and so then they can give me a card back. I do have a digital card because that's just a handy thing to have these days because more and more people are carrying them, but I still like the paper card. And with the paper card that you see with the hints, you could do this with your company. You could write out some 2 or 3 different little hints about how to hire a scaffolding company, or who are the people that you best service. So business cards are going to be exchanged. So I keep my cards in the right pocket. When you give me a card, it goes into the left pocket because I don't want to be giving you somebody else's cards. So all of a sudden you start feeling like, you're kind of in a jumble with your cards. And then I began to leave, and began to kind of close down. And this is where it's the toughest thing to do, because follow-up is where it matters. So later that evening, I invite everybody I meet on LinkedIn. I'll talk about LinkedIn in a minute, but I do invite people on LinkedIn. And then I begin to say to the people, hey, I'd like 15 minutes, hey, I'd like 15 minutes, and I go from there. Are there any questions about that part so far before I continue? Are there any questions about that part before I continue, and we can take questions at the end as well? All right. So one of the most important things to do also when you're networking is to reach out, not just when you need something. So I use the excuse of being in Denver. I had a chance to see some folks yesterday and today. I'm flying back tomorrow. So I went to my LinkedIn, I'll be in Denver, I'll be in Denver, I'll be in Denver. Not everybody did I have a chance to see, but I had a touch point. So I did a sense of reach out, and I didn't wait until I needed something. So reach out, and when somebody comes to mind, say something about that. The last time I was here in Denver was at a conference for women entrepreneurs. I sent 3 people emails. Guess where I am, Denver. Last time I was here was with you. Hope you're doing well. So this is what I call a net bank. Put some deposits into the net bank. And then as you begin to think about how you can get to know people and get to know them better and what you can do for them, that will be helpful. I mentioned LinkedIn. LinkedIn started in 2003. I did join it very, very early. It was around the same time as Facebook, which is why this cartoon is a little bit fun. According to LinkedIn, you're a focused, disciplined achiever. According to Facebook, you love Jack Daniels and you're comfortable with your body. The 2 of them started about the same time. Facebook had pictures. At the beginning of LinkedIn, it didn't even have photographs. So now then it went to be a place where you kind of were looking for a job. Now everybody should have a LinkedIn profile. And it doesn't have to be a fancy one. It doesn't have to be a sophisticated one. I do whole workshops just on LinkedIn. But you want to have what I call a minimal viable LinkedIn profile. Just enough so that somebody can find you. Because a lot of you get your business through referrals. Someone's going to look you up on LinkedIn. Do you even exist? So that's part of what I think is just really important. So then you can say, how in the world do you 2 know each other? This happened last year. I was in New York, and I got talking to somebody over dinner. We swap cards. I went to look at her LinkedIn. She knew one person in Boston. She knew another one in Atlanta. I'm like, how in the world would you know these 2 people who have nothing in common? And one was married to somebody else, and one she had known in college. So part of it is it just gave me a chance to get to know people. So your LinkedIn should have a photo. When I do my LinkedIn presentation, I have a collection of bad photos. Some of these look like you're in the witness protection program. One is a guy who is with the Dallas cheerleaders. Please don't have that on LinkedIn. That's not, unless you own the Dallas cheerleaders or the Dallas Cowboys, not a good thing. You want to have your summary be in the first person, and do add your contact information there, because it's not naturally there for LinkedIn to be able to get hold of you. And then add some hobbies or other things for people to talk to you about. I'm a former baby cuddler at Mass General, and I have that on there, and people like to talk about that. I now foster cats and dogs, and so that's something that people talk to me about. Put something up there with your hobbies. So I talked in the beginning about introverts. This is one of my favorite pictures of an introvert. And when you do personality assessments, you might do one. The Myers-Briggs is the one that's very common. There's DISC, that's another one. And so I have one that I jokingly call FFI. I'm a friendly, functional introvert. So I'm very friendly because I lived all over the world and I had to learn how to go talk to strangers. I'm very functional at, going to a cocktail party and working the room and saying hello to people and making them feel, engaged. But at the end of it, man, I'm really happy to put on my slippers and grab the remote control and be all by myself or snuggle with a kitten and just not have to talk to anybody. But one of the difficulties about introverts is that if we come across as tired or disengaged, we actually come across as rude or unfriendly. And so that is something that I think is really important for introverts to understand, is that we never want to make somebody feel unwelcomed. We don't want to make somebody feel like we're not happy to see them. But part of it is that we do find we're just drained. Introverts wake up with a full tank of gas, and then they meet people, and then a little bit less gas. And there's more people, and the gas is gone. And then at the end of the day, they're really, really tired of people. Extroverts wake up with an empty tank. I need my people, I need my people, I need my people. And I jokingly say this happened to Bill Clinton. When the government shut down, he was by himself. He needed people, and that's why he got in trouble with Monica. But seriously, it's a joke, but it's not a joke. But part of it is you want to be sure that you come across professional. You want to be sure you come across as thoughtful, and that you represent your industry and your profession in an engaging way. So that is one thing that you want to think about with introverts. All right, imposter syndrome. These are some pictures I also like. So imposter syndrome is also when we feel like introverts say to me, well, I don't feel like I belong. I don't feel like I can go out there and talk to people. That doesn't feel like me. And I'm like, why don't you just go out there and win the Oscar for playing that role? Just go out there and play the role. In order for me to get over my fear of public speaking, I took acting classes, and then I took stand-up comedy. When I took acting classes, I learned how to yell at people, which was really bizarre because I hadn't done that very much in my life. But what happened was when one of my very first speeches, somebody said to me, Diane, I'm sorry to interrupt you, was a gentleman sitting in kind of the front row close to where you are. I don't mean to interrupt you, Diane, but your neck is in red blotches. I think you've eaten something you're allergic to. No, I was just a nervous wreck. That's what the blotches were. So I thought, well, if it's that distracting, I need to find a way to overcome my fear of public speaking. I'd have a clipboard with me, and it would have bullet, bullet, it's almost over. Bullet, bullet, breathe. Because that helped me get through my talk in the beginning. What acting taught me to do was how to say my line. When to give there some space for either laughter or pause, or for someone to listen to something like the dyslexic introduction, which is like, what is that? Oh yeah, you say your name backwards. So part of it is you want to think about this, because imposter syndrome means that you feel something, and that's good. That's not something that's necessarily bad, but we don't want to have it be that absolutely paralyzes you. And when it's interesting, when I studied shyness, if you will, for my first book, The Networking Survival Guide, there's the Shyness Institute at Boston University that I spent some time talking to them, and we talked about the clinically shy or the functionally shy or the clinically shy. The clinically shy don't leave the house. The functionally shy do. The functionally shy are in the world, and we don't necessarily even know that they're just dying inside. And so part of it was giving them the role, giving them this opportunity. And then when I started looking at this and started realizing David Letterman is definitely a social phobic. Johnny Carson hated a cocktail party. Ellen DeGeneres, we know she's had some issues, but part of it is she's not comfortable in that kind of a setting. Stand-up comedians love stand-up comedy because they've written it, they've practiced it, and they know how to deliver it. And that gives them a sense of command in the room. So there's nothing that's unpredictable. Extroverts love unpredictable. They just love it because who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be fun. I'm like, oh gosh, maybe not. So part of it is, this is one of the things that happens with imposter syndrome. So when we're out sometimes in the social space, or even, when we are in virtual spaces, we see, oh, that person has so many likes on their photo. That means that I don't have that many likes. That begins to trigger us. Or everybody's having a nice conversation, or you see the young lady who's getting ready to ask the question. Or we had the comment about sweaty hands. Here's the tip you do if you've got sweaty hands, is put a cold can of soda in your right hand, and then you put it into your left hand saying, I'm so sorry, I didn't know that soda was all that kind of wet and cold. And people don't know it's the fact that you have sweaty hands. So that's a little bit of a tip. So find some different ways for you to make this important. The next element we're going to talk about is niceness. And this sounds like a little trite, but when was the last time you wrote a handwritten note? Or when was the last time you just gave somebody a compliment and actually put it in writing, even by email or text? So I'm going to invite you the next day or so is to think about some ways that you can express kindness, that you can express niceness and appreciation and gratitude. I was flying to Dallas, Texas a number of years ago, and the plane hit turbulence. And when I got on the plane, the guy across the aisle from me looked familiar, and I'm like, are you the weatherman, or what is it? How come you look familiar? He was somebody who I could clearly had seen before, but I couldn't place him. When we hit the turbulence, we hit a bump so hard, our arms went in the air, and he grabs my hand across the aisle, and he clutched my hand. I mean, it was definitely like, please. And I said, what can I do for you, sir? And he says, get the plane down. And I said, I really don't think you want me in the cockpit. Tell me what's taking you to Texas. Tell me are two magic words. Tell me what's taking you to Texas. Tell me what part of Boston you live in. Tell me how you got in your business. Tell me, what keeps you up at night. Tell me. So we're bouncing along, and I said, tell me what's taking you to Texas. And he says, football. I said, well, how about that? I teach people how to watch football. And this little bubble goes up like, really? Because you're a girl. But he doesn't say it out loud. And I said, yep, my dad was center, played in college. He had no sons. University of Colorado, we'd go up to that beautiful stadium. If you've ever been up there, it's just spectacular. And we would watch all kinds of football games. So I understand football a fair amount. I told this as slow as I could to calm him down. And then things kind of let go, and he let go of the clutch. And I said, well, since we've held hands, should we introduce ourselves? And he said, that's fair. And he said, my name's Gene DeFilippo. And I said, how come I know your name? And he says, I'm the athletic director for Boston College. And I said, you want to teach football with me? And he looked at me like, are you kidding? I nearly saw God. And it was the wrong time. So I skipped over the niceness thing. I went straight for the close. I should have given it some time. So what I did was I wrote him a handwritten note about 6 months later and said, I saw on the Boston Globe that you're retiring. Would you like to teach football with me now? He calls, and we end up getting on CBS News. So part of it is be thoughtful about your timing, but also be generous about how you say thankful, how you express gratitude for people. This is a Harvard study about happiness that's been around for a long time. I believe actually Bill Gates participated in it when he was a student there. But, they say money doesn't buy happiness, it does buy everything else. But, you want to think about what are some ways for you to be thinking about other people and just say, hey, you're on my thoughts today. You came to mind when I was flying in, or you came into my mind because of this. And just shoot people a quick text or a quick note. The last element I'm going to talk about is guanxi. A couple reasons for this is that I wanted to have a non-English word because you want to have a diversified network. And I'm not talking about this in the DEI part of things, that's just the politically correct thing. When you go meet with your financial planner, they say you need a diversified portfolio that makes you richer. The same thing is true with your network. So you want people who look different than you or have different experiences than you. CVS did a study, because they're based in Providence, Rhode Island. They did a study one time. There was one store that did really, really well, and they couldn't figure out what that store did. Was it the people? They discovered that it was the shelves were lower. Women do more shopping in CVS than men, and the women could see over the shelf and say, oh, I need that too. And they bought more stuff because they were catering to short people. So you want to think about how can you have something that is different, and how do you have people who have different experiences. And this picture of an elephant is a great example of it. You have the person at the front who thinks it's a spear. Everybody in this picture is blindfolded. You have the person on the top feeling the ears that are waving. That's a fan. It's not a fan, it's just the elephant's ears. You have the person on the end who says it's a rope. Where are you standing around that elephant? You see something different. So let's recap the presentation. We defined networking. We talked about it, building relationships before you need them, and it is the transference of trust. We talked about an action plan, talking to individuals and also doing some understanding about when you're at an event. We talked about reaching out. We talked about LinkedIn. We talked about introverts. We talked about niceness and nurturing your network. And last, we talked about guanxi. And if you look at that and you see the front in the vertical, what do you see? Darling. That's how I remember my speech with no notes. So I'm going to invite you from now on to schedule an in-person meeting or a virtual phone call, something along those lines, with someone who's different than you. Extrovert, introvert. Find somebody who's an extrovert. Somebody who just loves to go to a party. How do they do that? How does that work for them? Talk to an introvert. How do you do this? How are you so quiet? How does this work? This is my book in multiple languages. I will share with you. It's just more of a brag slide than anything else, because it's really bizarre when you write a book, but you can't read it. And it's in Korean, it's in Indonesian, Thai, Chinese, Portuguese, and a couple of other different languages. I invite you to give me some feedback. I would welcome your feedback. So you can go to talk.ac/Diane Darling, or you can scan that QR code and give me some feedback. I work alone, I live alone. Somebody tell me they'd loan me their teenager. You give me lots of feedback. But I welcome your feedback, because I would love to know what part of this worked for you and what part of this did not work for you. And with that, I welcome any questions that you may have, and I hope this has been helpful. Yes? Sorry? How do you make beer can chicken? How do you make beer can chicken? Who's good at this? Were you the one who was talking about beer can chicken? Come on up. It's really delicious. You literally take a beer. At one time somebody said, you toss out some of the beer, and they're like, you never toss out beer. You drink the bad beer, even if it's bad beer. You shove it up the chicken's butt, and you put it on a grill, and it just steams, and it makes it really yummy. Yeah. Any other questions? Any other questions? Yes.
Plant question could I put out there? What would that question have been? And your answer to it.
So the question was, if he had emailed me ahead of time, what would be the plant question? Part of it might be, how do I overcome my fear of public speaking? We talk about that. I talked a little bit about it. Another question that people often ask me is how I got started with this. I got started in a very weird way, was that I had started a business called Lost and Found, and we were going to help airlines and hotels manage their lost and found inventory. That was really fascinating, I have to tell you, from what the stuff that gets left behind in hotels. Never mind the hotels that get a call from, they call somebody and say, oh, you left your watch? My husband was at a hotel, huh? That was something that didn't cross my mind, but that was something that was an issue. Sadly, September 11th happened, and I had lost all my money. I'd taken out all my savings for that business. And somebody said to me, Diane, you're good at connecting people. Could you do a workshop about networking? And I was like, ooh, that's creepy. I really thought networking was creepy. And they said, no, it's helping people. And I really kind of didn't embrace that side of it. And they said, no, you help people get jobs, you help them to get roommates, you help them get, a tennis partner, all kinds of different things. You connect them over and over again. Could you give a talk about that? And I said, what do you want to know? And she said, well, what if somebody doesn't call me back? How do I send a thank you to the person who made the introduction? Do I give them compensation? How does that work? So I said, give me 10 questions like David Letterman, and I gave that talk. And someone in the back of the room said, what's your speaking fee? I'd like to hire you. And I'm like, oh, okay. That started the business. And that's the questions. Yeah.
So here's the question. When you come back from an event like this,
yeah,
and you've got a stack of business cards,
yeah,
and everybody has a stack of business cards, and you're struggling to catch up on work that you missed while you were gone, what's your strategy in terms of how to follow up, when to follow up, and how do you stand out among the 14 other people who are following up with them?
Yeah, it's a great question. And David's going to be your speaker tomorrow, so you'll have a good time, and I'll be here to see him speak as well. What I do is I scan the business cards, I take pictures of them, and I also scan them into my CRM tool. Everybody who I get, if you want to leave your cards on the table today, I'm happy to take them and do some follow-up and send you some other goodies. That's something I do. But part of what it is I let people self-select by saying to me, Diane, I'd like to talk to you about this. I'd like to talk to you about that. That is one thing that I do. I also do invite them on LinkedIn, and when I do that, I get a sense of who we have in common. And I'll say, wow, I didn't know we had so-and-so in common, just thought I'd say hello. It's definitely something that, that is one thing that I would love to have a personal assistant just deal with the cards. It's definitely, I recently moved and I have like 3 or 4 moving boxes of just business cards that I've collected over the years. It's pretty overwhelming, yeah. One last question, I think we're out of time, but one last question? Nope.
Oh, we got one more.
Great.
You ready?
Are you ready, Julian?
Woo! Good throw.
My question is, so, nowadays you get so many messages online
Yeah.
and people reaching out and everything. So what is a good icebreaker if there's someone you really want to get introduced to? You don't really have anything common with them, but they're very interesting people, and that would make them answer you among all the people that are reaching out to them for something.
Can you say that again? I'm not sure I caught the question.
Sure, I can have a translator if you want. Yeah, I'm not from here, but when you get those people, like let's say the CEO of Intel, right, gets thousands of requests a day, most likely, of people that want something from him, right? What can be a good icebreaker or something that would make you stand out?
What's a good icebreaker to meet somebody?
Online, on LinkedIn, stuff
Yep.
like to make them accept you and answer you.
Yep. So I do lots of invitations on LinkedIn, and I'll do a couple things. Is I'll sincerely look at their LinkedIn and I'll say, I see we know so and so in common. Often what I'll do is if I see that we have David in common, I will say, hey David, I'd like to use your name when I reach out to Jack. Is that okay? Because what Jack is going to do is he may call David and say, by the way, I got an invitation from Diane. Do you know her, or is she not a good person worth my time? So I definitely usually try and find somebody we have in common. I will also compliment people, and I do this when I need absolutely nothing. So if I'm on the plane tomorrow night when I'm flying back and I see somebody in a newspaper article, I was quoted in the press the other day. I gave some advice to Tim Waltz and J.D. Vance before the debate the other night. Whether or not they read my advice, I don't know. But I was asked by a reporter what advice I would give for them to overcome their fear of public speaking and being in a debate. So what I do in these situations is, if I see somebody quoted, I'll say, great quote, congratulations, you were in the Wall Street Journal. And I use that as a placeholder for a future contact. But I don't wait for 5 years. When I'm unemployed and I see they're the CEO of the company or their head of hiring or their head of HR or something like that, I try and meet with them ahead of time so there's some sort of context along those lines. All right, thank you so very much. I hope this was helpful.